In order to prove that the nature of snakes is inherently licentious, I married a snake woman as my wife. On our wedding night, I forced her to reveal her giant serpent tail, looking at the part of her body below her slender waist. It had entirely transformed into the gleaming body of a snake. The sharp tip of her tail flicked restlessly on the ground. Her demeanor also changed drastically. From her previously gentle and obedient manner, she became a complete queen. Especially those long, narrow, beautiful eyes, coldly gazing at me. Isn't this the Medusa queen herself? Conquering a queen. Now that was something truly thrilling. 3 days ago, I transmigrated to this place. The body I now occupy once belonged to a scholar. He had been scared to death by a water ghost while crossing a bridge. Just as I was waiting for my memories to fully merge with this scholar's, the door was suddenly flung open with a loud bang. An old man hurried in, exclaiming, "Ah, the matchmaker has already brought your new bride. Why are you still dozing off here?" Following the old man, I arrived at the ancestral hall of the village. A large crowd of villagers had already gathered, eager to watch the spectacle. Upon seeing me arrive, the village chief pointed to a bench in front and said, "Go sit down. Some time ago, you encountered a terrible evil and brought bad luck upon yourself. This time, we've chosen a good bride for you to drive away the misfortune. Perhaps your health will recover more quickly." Still dazed and confused, the village chief, Li Guanghin, signaled to the matchmaker beside him, "Bring the girl here." With that, a group of women appeared, rounding a corner. Among them, one exceptionally beautiful woman instantly captured everyone's attention. The most striking feature, however, were her vertical pupils, eyes that were clearly not human. It was precisely these strange, serpentine eyes that drew the gaze of everyone present. What kind of world is this, really? As I stared at this woman in a daze, some people from the village started grumbling in displeasure. "Matchmaker, what is the meaning of this? Are you treating us folks from Shig Village as fools? Shig Village has even produced a county magistrate before. How could you bring us a snake woman?" The matchmaker, standing nearby, quickly tried to smooth things over. "Oh my! Dear sirs, just look at her appearance. Is she any ordinary snake woman? I've been arranging marriages for years, and I've never come across one half as beautiful as her. And besides, the court has decreed for many years now that whether human or demon, they are all citizens of the Shenling Empire." The matchmaker herself hadn't wanted to bring a snake woman. It could ruin her reputation after all. But her young son had encountered some terrible bad luck recently, and no matter who she sought out, nothing could cure him. It was only Su Leon's mother who healed him. Su Leon's mother asked for nothing in return, except for her daughter to be matched and married off. Seeing how Su Leon was indeed beautiful and radiant, the matchmaker decided to give it a try. Yet, after visiting over a dozen villages, they were all rejected. Upon hearing the matchmaker's words, some of the older women scoffed. "What's the use of being just a pretty face? Look at those tiny arms and legs. She wouldn't be able to do any work if she married into our village. And besides, she looks far too enchanting. If a woman like her married into the village, would our men still have any thoughts of staying at home? Not to mention, since this woman appeared, my husband's eyes haven't left her for a second." As for the village women's complaints, Su Leon, standing quietly at the back of the crowd, lowered her head and softly defended herself. "I can work. I can also take care of people. I am the eldest daughter of my family, and I've done all the household chores." But no one paid attention. They just continued picking at Su Leon's faults. As I gazed at her in a daze, someone nudged me from the side. An old woman next to me, smiling slyly, said, "What are you staring at? Aren't you going to make a move? And this time, don't bother with all that scholarly nonsense. This is the last batch of the year. If you don't find someone now, you'll have to wait until next year." I turned my head and looked around. All the unmarried young men in the village had already gone up to chat with the other girls. But the men around Su Leon were all the most unmotivated ones in the village. Not only were their families dirt poor, they spent their days lazing around. If not, they were gambling addicts. And those with decent family conditions had just been about to approach her, but their mothers pointed at their noses and scolded them back. I got up and walked towards Su Lian. At that moment, she looked up and saw me approaching. The men who were trying to strike up a conversation in front of her seemed somewhat intimidating. Their faces gave off a menacing vibe, and the questions they asked were crude and embarrassing, especially with those lecherous looks on their faces. It was clear they were not decent people. But Su Lian understood. With her identity as a snake woman, she had little chance of marrying into a good family. As Su Lian looked at the men with fear in her eyes, a hand reached from behind and pushed them aside. I spoke directly. "Miss, do you think I'm a suitable match?" Su Lian looked up at me. Compared to the others, my appearance was gentle, and I had the air of a scholar. Naturally, my sudden interruption annoyed the other men. One of them immediately raised an eyebrow and shouted, "What are you doing? Don't you know about first come, first served?" I found it amusing. Since when did something like this follow the first come, first served rule? At this moment, Su Lian, who had almost given up hope, saw me, and her beautiful, enchanting eyes lit up with a glimmer of hope. This scene did not escape the eyes of the other men. One of them instantly tried to expose my flaws. "Don't be fooled by his decent appearance. He's useless. All he does is read a few worthless books. His family is even poorer than ours." But Su Lian was still satisfied with me. Being poor didn't matter to her. What mattered was that I seemed like a decent man, unlike the others whose lustful gazes made her uncomfortable. Su Lian wasn't expecting to marry into a wealthy family, to live in luxury anyway. Being stared at with such intense eyes, Su Lian suddenly felt shy and lowered her head, saying, "If you don't mind me, that's good enough." In the next second, I reached out and grabbed Su Lian's soft, delicate hand. Turning to the village chief seated in the middle, I declared, "I want to marry her." As soon as I finished speaking, a cold, mechanical voice echoed in my mind. "Congratulations, host, for triggering a ninefold reward. You have obtained holy physique and 100,000 taels of silver. The rewards have been deposited into the host's system space. You may access them at any time." Right after I spoke, the entire village fell silent. No one had expected me to choose Su Lian. After all, she was considered the least desirable among the group. In no time, the crowd erupted into a cacophony of voices, mostly complaining that Su Lian was a lowly snake woman, not a proper human being. Shik village had a proud, upright reputation, and never before had a demon married into the village. And with her slender arms and legs, they doubted she could do any hard work in the future. Everyone was urging Lu Yuan not to make such a rash decision. They reminded me that I had just recently encountered misfortune, and yet I dared to marry such a creature. But there I stood, holding Su Lian's delicate hand, calmly staring at the crowd from the center. Before, I might have thought these villagers were looking out for me. But now, with all my memories fully merged, I knew there weren't many good-hearted people in this village. As the crowd's noise grew louder, I suddenly slammed the table and said, "I'm marrying a wife, and I don't need you all to meddle in my business. I came here to inform you, not to ask for your approval." Seeing her man stand up for her like this, Su Lian felt a warm sweetness in her heart. The villagers, on the other hand, were shocked. The quietest and most timid person in the village was now bold enough to slam the table. Everyone thought that Lu Yuan must have been bewitched by this little demoness. If she married into the village, they feared their own men might have their souls snatched away by her too. Immediately, some of the older women raised their voices to rebuke me even louder, but I simply tilted my head and sneered. "Stop spouting nonsense. I'm marrying this woman, and if you don't let me, then I'll leave. And before I go, I'll take my great-grandfather's grave with me. The moment I finished speaking, the village chief, who had been silent all along, suddenly slammed his hand on the table as well, glaring at me angrily. Stop this nonsense. Your great-grandfather has been resting in peace for years, and now you want to disturb him? Is this how you show respect to your ancestor? With a careless grin, I raised my eyebrows and said, cut the crap, just tell me whether I can marry this woman or not, and if we can live here afterward. My blatant disregard for his authority infuriated the village chief to no end, but it seemed like he truly feared that I might actually move my great-grandfather's grave. In the end, he clenched his teeth and said, you're the only one left in the Liu family now. Of course, it's up to you to decide. We're all just looking out for you. If you won't listen, then so be it. Seeing this, I finally felt satisfied. Yet the older women standing nearby still wanted to say more, intent on stopping Su Lian from marrying into the village. But the village chief could only offer them placations, daring not to argue with me further. At that moment, the matchmaker cautiously stepped forward again, her face showing an anxious expression as she spoke. Well, master, there's something I haven't told you yet. I turned around and looked at the matchmaker with confusion. What is it? At that moment, I felt Su Lian, whose hand I was holding, trembling slightly. Turning to look at her, I saw Su Lian with her head lowered, appearing a bit frightened. The matchmaker quickly spoke. Master, don't worry. Lian is a hardworking, resilient girl. She's healthy with no illnesses, but she shows signs of atavism. Atavism? What's that? Upon hearing this, the older women immediately breathed a sigh of relief. Atavism, huh? That's so unlucky. Seeing the confusion on my face, one of the older women sneered and said, and you've read so many books, yet you don't even know what that means. Atavism means she could suddenly revert to her ancestor's form. At that moment, Su Lian anxiously raised her head and quickly explained, I only revert in the lower half of my body. It won't be a full transformation. Previously, those who had been captivated by Su Lian's beauty and had wanted to marry her immediately gave up upon hearing about the atavism. After all, who would want to wake up every morning next to a giant snake? How terrifying would that be? At that moment, Su Lian looked at me pitifully, afraid that I might abandon her. Meanwhile, I stood there, lost in thought. Atavism, where the lower half turns into a snake. Isn't that like Medusa or Zhaolinger? Wow, that's so cool! Seeing the expression on my face, everyone around was dumbfounded. Wait a minute! Why does this guy seem even more excited? I looked at Su Lian again. Zhaolinger was the innocent type, while Su Lian had the sultry, alluring presence of a femme fatale. Thinking about it this way, she really did resemble Medusa a bit. Su Lian looked at me with astonishment, though she didn't understand why her man was eyeing her so intently. But she could tell. His gaze wasn't filled with the disgust or disdain that others showed her. Feeling incredibly joyful, Su Lian shyly lowered her head, her grip on my hand tightening. I snapped out of my thoughts, looked at the bewildered village chief, and said, we're heading back now. We'll return tonight to the ancestral hall to pay our respects. Make sure to leave the door open for us. With that, I led Su Lian away. The matchmaker, watching Su Lian obediently follow me, called out loudly, Lian, come by around noon and tell me where your family lives, so I can go inform your parents. Blushing, Su Lian turned back to the matchmaker and nodded. Got it, auntie. The people of Shig Village watched the backs of Su Lian and me with mixed expressions. Most of the men were filled with envy, whether she was a snake woman or not, and whether it was unlucky or not. With that kind of beauty, it would be worth dying for even just once. As for the women, most of them were absolutely furious, but they all shared one common question. When did this guy change so much? In the past, everyone used to bully him, and today, He had turned the tables and taught them a lesson. It left them all feeling deeply unsettled. The world I had transmigrated to was vast and filled with strange happenings. In the north, the empire was at war with the beast clans. Within the empire, there were all sorts of malevolent spirits and creatures. However, since this world had such beings, it naturally had ways to deal with them too. For example, the soldiers who fought on the bloody battlefield had crawled out from mountains of corpses and oceans of blood. No evil spirit would dare approach them. The monks in the temples and the Taoist priests in the shrines also had methods to exorcise and destroy these spirits. As for my great-grandfather, he had once been the county magistrate here. Though he was an official of the former dynasty, he had still been granted a title of authority. This bestowed him with a form of official fortune. And even after his death, when he was buried in his grave, he naturally suppressed all ghosts and evil spirits. Shik village had remained safe because of my great-grandfather's presence. No evil spirit dared to come and disturb us here. They only dared to wander outside the village. And so, thanks to my great-grandfather, Shik village had grown into a massive village over the past few decades. That's also why I dared to stand up to the village chief earlier. As for my attitude toward the villagers, it was purely because after merging the memories, I learned about past events and couldn't help but feel disgusted. Most of my family's belongings had been swindled away by the villagers, leaving only this brick house. The previous owner of this body was a spineless scholar who had been mercilessly bullied, even though those events had nothing to do with the current me. Just imagining it made me furious. I wasn't planning on living here forever either. Once I became successful, I'd definitely move away. So there was no need to indulge these people. I'd live in a way that made me comfortable. Before long, I led Su Leon back to the house. She gazed at the brick house in front of her. "So grand," she exclaimed. Others had told her that her man's family was poor, so Su Leon had imagined a tiny mud hut. I chuckled from the side and explained. My great-grandfather used to be a county magistrate, so he left this house behind. My parents a few years back were transporting goods in the south when they were ambushed by bandits. Now it's just the two of us here. No rules, no restrictions. Su Leon blinked at me and nodded absent-mindedly, then followed me into the courtyard. As I walked ahead, I asked, "You must have come early from another village, right? You probably haven't eaten yet this morning?" For girls like Su Leon, if the match was successful, they would directly move into the man's house. If the match didn't work out, they'd just find some shelter in the village for the night, then head to the next village in the morning. Coming this early today, it's likely she hadn't eaten much this morning. Su Leon lowered her head and shyly responded with a quiet mm. I pointed to the chicken coop in the courtyard and said, "I'll kill a chicken later. Make you some chicken soup to drink. You need to nourish yourself properly. Look how skinny you are." Su Leon was startled, then hurriedly raised her hand and waved it. "No, that's not necessary. Anything simple is fine. We've got to live within our means." Though the house was grand, Su Leon could tell the family wasn't exactly wealthy. I was quite pleased with Su Leon's frugality. This wife really knew how to manage a household, super sensible and thoughtful. But we're definitely eating chicken today. I stopped in my tracks, turned to face Su Leon, who had also stopped beside me, and leaned in close. Su Leon, watching my face get nearer and nearer, her already beautiful face instantly flushed a deep red. Shy beyond words, Su Leon only lowered her head slightly, but she didn't pull away. That bashful, charming expression made me fall for her even more. "Eat as much as you want," I said. "Actually, we're quite wealthy. From now on, as long as you're with me, you'll live the good life. Meat with every meal." Hearing her husband's words, Su Leon's face was filled with curiosity. "We're wealthy? It doesn't really seem like it." Then, from my system space, I pulled out 2 large silver ingots, seeing 100 taels of silver suddenly appear in front of her. Su Lian was thoroughly startled. In her entire life, the silver she had seen all added up wouldn't even come close to 100 taels. Don't worry about money. Our family has plenty, I said, putting the silver away again, without giving it to Su Lian. In these times, it was the men who handled the money. Women didn't manage finances. Why else were they called the master of the house? Of course, I wouldn't hide the fact that I had money from my wife, since we'd obviously be eating well from now on. There'd be no shortage of meat and wine. I wasn't about to hide my wealth and sneak out to eat fancy food while leaving my wife at home to gnaw on dry bread. There was no need for that. And besides, it wouldn't be right. It's a situation easy to explain anyway. Looking at Su Lian's stunned expression, and before she could even ask, I offered the excuse I had already thought up. My great-grandfather was a county magistrate, remember? But I don't show off the money. Plus, when I was living alone before, I didn't have much to spend on. So no one in the village knew. Now that I've married you, of course we're going to eat well and live well. Don't worry. We've got enough money to drink wine and eat meat every day for the rest of our lives. With that, I pushed open the door and entered the house. Su Lian stood there in a daze, wondering, if my husband is so well off, why did he choose me? What are you standing there for? Come inside. There's food in the kitchen. Make us something to eat. Perfect. I haven't eaten anything this morning either. Let's have something together. After entering the house, I sat in the main hall and crossed my legs comfortably. After all, isn't getting a wife meant to have someone take care of you? Su Lian, snapping back to reality, responded with a soft "Amen," and immediately came in, setting down the small bundle she had been carrying. Following the direction I had pointed, she headed into the kitchen to start preparing food. In the meantime, I took the opportunity to open up my system space. I glanced at the description of the holy physique. Immune to all curses, invulnerable to all evil. It seemed to be a tool specifically designed for this world. After using it, I felt a surge of mystical energy flood my body, as if I had gained boundless strength. The eyes that had grown blurry from reading late into the night suddenly became incredibly clear. Though my body still appeared thin and weak, it felt like I now had endless energy. Just then, Su Lian came out of the kitchen after only a short while. She looked at me, dazed in the main hall, and said, a bit puzzled, "Brother, it seems like there's nothing in the kitchen." Su Lian wanted to call me master or husband, but she was still a little shy about it. So in the end, she just called me brother. For a moment, I was surprised. Nothing in the kitchen? Then let's go eat at the town. Besides, with a new wife just arrived, buying some new things will add to the celebration. Su Lian nodded obediently. As soon as we stepped outside, I suddenly felt something soft in my hand. I turned to look. I saw Su Lian shyly come up beside me, gently slipping her soft hand around my arm. Back when I was on Earth, I never had a girlfriend, never held anyone's hand. Now, after just arriving here, I already have such a stunning wife. It's a bit overwhelming, to be honest. We took a small detour on the way and passed by the ancestral hall. The crowd hadn't dispersed yet. The matchmaker, seeing Su Lian and me approaching, couldn't help but laugh and said, "From far away, I could see you smiling. This man must be very pleased." Ha! Su Lian shyly lowered her head, staying silent. But judging from her expression, she was clearly very satisfied. Seeing Su Lian like this, the matchmaker was also pleased. At least now she could give Su Lian's mother a good report. Curious, the matchmaker asked, "Why are you both here so early? Shouldn't you be helping out at home?" "I'm not leaving until afternoon," she added. Su Lian raised her head slightly, her face full of happiness as she replied, "My husband cares about me. He's taking me to town to buy some things." Hearing this, the people nearby turned their heads. Even the women who had come with Su Lian couldn't help but look on with envy. Clearly, this man treated Su Lian very well. After that, I took Su Lian and we headed toward town. Around noon, 2 ox carts arrived on the village's main road. The elderly man leading the way got off the cart and clasped his hands in greeting. "Excuse me, could you help me with some information? Where is Lu Yuan's house located? We're here to deliver something to Master Lu." The crowd looked at the old man, then glanced at the ox carts filled with sacks of flour, half a pig, several large jugs of wine, and what appeared to be expensive fabric. Wasn't Lu Yuan supposed to be dirt poor? After the old man left, the villagers immediately began speaking in a sarcastic tone. "Look at this little demoness. She just married him, and already she's coaxed Lu Yuan into buying all these things. Such a waste. Mark my words. Within 6 months, Lu Yuan will probably sell off his entire house because of this demoness." While the villagers were muttering their bitter words, I was leisurely strolling through the town with Su Lian. Su Lian, seeing her husband buy so many things, felt a bit pained. It was one thing for him to buy good food, but the cloth he bought for her to make clothes. Each piece cost 3 taels of silver, and it was of the finest quality. Standing timidly beside me, Su Lian softly said, "Brother, how about we return the fabric? I'll have to work in the fields later. It'd be a shame to wear such fine cloth." Hearing this, I turned toward her and said, "Wearing it on you is never a waste. Think about it. When you wear this beautiful clothing, isn't it for me to see? And when I see you looking so lovely in these clothes, won't I treasure you even more? Don't you want your husband to cherish you even more?" Su Lian was startled, completely caught off guard by her husband's strange logic. Her face flushed with shyness. She lowered her head, and in a soft, coy voice, she replied, I want brother to cherish me more." Hearing this, I grinned and said, "Hey, that's the spirit. Don't worry. Brother isn't tricking you. We have plenty of money. We'll never run out." While Su Lian was still in a daze, I suddenly put on a more serious face and said, "Also, who's the master of the house? Whose word do we listen to?" Su Lian paused for a moment, but quickly responded, "Of course, brother. You're the head of the household, so I'll listen to everything you say." After she finished speaking, I lifted my chin proudly and said, "That's right. So from now on, just be a good wife and listen to your husband. No talking back, or else. Su Lian shyly lowered her head, knowing that her husband was just teasing her. She also understood that he was showing his love by buying her so many things. Her heart felt sweet and full of joy. "I understand, master." Finally, Su Lian sweetly addressed me. I corrected her with a smile. "Master sounds too old-fashioned. Just call me brother, it sounds much better." By evening, the two of us returned to the village, hand in hand, feeling incredibly happy. I looked at Su Lian and said, "We won't have our wedding feast here in the village. First, we don't have any relatives left here. And second, there aren't many good people in the village. If we host a nice banquet, we'd just be letting others take advantage for no reason. We'll have a proper celebration at your family's place instead." Su Lian hadn't expected her husband to plan a wedding feast. In these chaotic times, most ordinary families were content just to survive. Living a peaceful life was already a blessing. Su Lian could see clearly now that her husband was truly special in every way. But still, spending money like this felt a bit too extravagant, even though her husband said the family had money. No matter how much money they had, it shouldn't be wasted recklessly. Her husband wasn't one to save, so she, as his wife, needed to help keep him in check. Otherwise, she'd really end up being seen as a spendthrift wife in the eyes of others. Without realizing it, Su Lian had already settled into the mindset of being the good wife of the Lu family. Thinking about how to save money for the household, she immediately clung to her husband's arm, speaking sweetly, "Brother, let's not hold the banquet. The people on my side of the family aren't that great either. They've always bullied us. We shouldn't let them take advantage." I waved my hand dismissively and said, "Doesn't your family still have some relatives? We can invite them over and fill the courtyard. We'll save where we need to, but we'll also spend where it counts. We still have to host a proper banquet." Seeing that her husband wouldn't agree, determined to spend the money, Su Leon wanted to say more. But suddenly there was a sharp asterisk smack asterisk, followed by her soft and incredibly alluring cry. I grinned mischievously at her shy face and teased, "Not listening again? Want another spanking?" Having her bottom smacked in public, Su Leon's face turned beet red. Too embarrassed to even look up at her husband, she could only pout slightly and said in a playful voice, "Brother, you're so bad." Seeing her so stunning and shy, I couldn't help but love her even more. Besides, we really do have money. 10,000 taels of silver. How could we ever spend it all? And even if we do, we can always make more. As I confidently led Su Leon back to the village, we passed by the stone bridge where the water ghost lurked. Seeing the bridge, I suddenly felt a bit uneasy and tugged Su Leon to change direction. Su Leon looked at me curiously, not understanding why we were taking a different route. Unable to hide it any longer, I awkwardly explained. "A few days ago, I encountered a malevolent spirit on that bridge. A water ghost. It nearly scared me to death." Well, in fact, did asterisk scare me to death. That's how I ended up here in this body. I really don't want to be scared to death again. It'd be a shame, especially now that I've just married such a beautiful wife. Hearing this, Su Leon blinked and said, "Brother, don't worry. Tonight, I'll talk to it on your behalf and ask it not to appear in front of you again." I stared at my wife in astonishment. Who knew my wife had such abilities? "Are you sure?" I blinked, asking with a mix of curiosity and doubt. Listening to her, it sounded quite professional, but I couldn't shake the lingering fear. Su Leon, however, remained resolute and confident. "It'll definitely work. I learned it from my mother. I'll talk to it tonight. And after that, it won't dare scare you anymore." Seeing how sure she was, I nodded, a bit dazed. Even though I wasn't entirely convinced, there didn't seem to be any harm in giving it a try. After all, talking to the spirit couldn't hurt. In the end, we took the long way around and returned home. Once we got back, Su Leon immediately began tidying up the things in the courtyard. Su Leon began organizing the things we bought from the town, while I didn't offer to help at all. After all, from now on, housework would be Su Leon's responsibility. If I helped too much today, she might not know where to find things tomorrow. Honestly, though, it was mainly because I was feeling a bit lazy after eating and drinking my fill. Once everything was tidied up, Su Leon went to the corner of the yard and found an old bull. We used to have a dog, and after it died, the bull was left there. Then Su Leon gathered 3 stones from the same corner, along with a handful of sand. When everything was prepared, she blinked her beautiful eyes at me and said, "Brother, let's go." I was utterly confused and asked, "What are you even holding?" Su Leon lifted the stones in her hand and said, "These are steamed buns." Then she lifted the broken bowl filled with sand and added, "And this is rice. It's all for the water ghost." Will that even work? Aren't you just trying to fool the ghost? Su Leon nodded earnestly and said, "Exactly. That's the whole point, fooling the ghost. A water ghost is just a mass of resentment. You only need to go through the motions. It won't be able to tell the difference." Still uncertain, I hesitated and said, "Maybe we should steam some real buns, use white flour, and make some real rice. After all, we need to eat something tonight too." Hearing this, Su Leon looked at me with a pained expression and said, "There's no need for that. It'd be a waste to give it to the water ghost. Once we offer something to them, we can't eat it ourselves. Watching my wife's heartache over wasting food, I couldn't help but chuckle and said, "Be good, let's finish this quickly, so we can get back to bed early." Hearing this, Su Leon's cheeks flushed red, but she obediently went to prepare everything. Once all was ready, Su Leon grabbed the basket and headed out with me. The buns hadn't had enough time to rise properly, so they were a bit dense, but still better than using stones. At least, that's what I thought, better than fooling the ghost with rocks. By now, the sky had gone completely dark. As we walked, I said, "When we get back, we'll change into the new clothes we bought, and then head to the ancestral hall to pay our respects tonight." Su Leon shyly nodded, her heart filled with emotion. Before, she had thought she would never get married. And even if someone did want her, it wouldn't be anyone good. But unexpectedly, today she had truly gotten married, and her husband was so kind, so considerate of her. The whole day had felt like a dream to Su Leon. As they walked out of the village toward the stone bridge, I glanced at the dark, looming bridge ahead. For a moment, I felt a chill of unease, the lingering fear from the past still haunting me. The psychological shadow of that experience was too strong. Even though I now had the holy physique and was immune to all evil, logically speaking, these malevolent spirits couldn't harm me anymore. But still, the situation wasn't that simple. I was genuinely scared of these kinds of things. Maybe I shouldn't go. I'll just wait by that tree over there. Su Leon found her husband's fear kind of cute, especially considering how earlier he had boldly slammed the village chief's table. Now, though, he's scared of a little malevolent spirit. What's there to be afraid of? People are much scarier than spirits. Finally, I stopped under a big tree. While Su Leon, carrying the basket, went over to the bank near the stone bridge. She lit the candles and then started murmuring something. Whether it was just my imagination or not, I began to feel a chill down my spine, like something was watching me from the shadows. I felt safer being near Su Leon, so I gathered my courage and walked up to her. As I got closer, I could finally hear what she was muttering. I had thought it might be some sort of ritual chant, but it turned out to be plain, simple talk. She was saying things like, "My husband even brought you white-steamed buns to eat, so don't scare him anymore." Can this really work? By the time I arrived, Su Leon had just finished her murmuring. She picked up the bowl from the ground and bowed toward the surroundings a few times. With that done, we headed back home together. We washed up thoroughly, changed into our new clothes, and then went to the ancestral hall. There, we found the tablets of my Liu family ancestors and paid our respects. With that, the matter was settled. Afterward, I hurriedly pulled the blushing Su Leon back home. I told Su Leon to wait for me in the room, while I locked all the doors and windows. I pulled the curtains shut, and when I turned back, I saw Su Leon sitting shyly on the edge of the bed. Rubbing my hands together, I approached her. Looking at my shy and endlessly charming wife, I grinned and said, "Come on, show me your big tail first." Su Leon was utterly surprised. "Why do you want to see something like that? What's so interesting about it?" "It's scary." Su Leon looked at me, completely confused, but seeing the eager look in my eyes, she couldn't help but feel shy again. Earlier, she had just been relieved that her husband didn't mind her atavistic trait. But now, it seemed like not only did he not mind it, he actually liked it. Could someone really like something this frightening? Feeling even more bashful, Su Leon hesitated for a moment, then decided to indulge her husband's request. After all, they were married now, so naturally, she had to listen to her husband. With a blush on her face, Su Leon shyly removed her pants, worried that her atavistic transformation might tear the new ones they had just bought. As her beautifully long and smooth legs were revealed, I barely had time to admire them before a flash of light appeared, and then her large snake tail appeared. It was exactly as I had imagined. From Su Leon's slender waist down, everything had turned into the shimmering body of a snake. The pointed tip of her tail flicked restlessly on the ground. Her demeanor also changed drastically from the sweet and gentle woman she had been before. Even with a touch of cuteness, she now transformed into a complete queen, especially with those long, narrow, mesmerizing eyes. Though the icy vertical pupils still held a hint of shyness, and the blush on her incredibly beautiful face made her all the more irresistible. In the end, I couldn't hold back any longer. With a howl, and accompanied by Su Leon's soft whimper, I pounced on her. The next day, around 4 or 5 in the morning, Su Leon woke up first, still nestled in my arms. Last night, her husband had clung to her snake form, kissing and nibbling all over, which had thoroughly embarrassed Su Leon. She looked up and saw me still sound asleep, and couldn't resist leaning in to give me a soft kiss. With a face full of happiness, she quietly got up and went to prepare some firewood to heat water, ready to help her husband wash up later. Later that morning, I went into town by myself to see if there were any shops for sale. The system had given me 10,000 taels of silver, so buying a few shops and renting them out seemed like the safest bet. Even with all this money, starting a business wasn't something I could risk. That's just asking to lose it all. It's like a rich second-generation heir wasting money in fancy clubs. They can party their whole life and still never go broke. But the moment they get the urge to start a business or make an investment, that's when everything goes wrong. Besides, going to the city would give me a chance to see the world and maybe even secure a government position. In these times, just having money isn't enough. No matter how rich you are, you're still a commoner. With the war pressing on the front lines, if they want to conscript you, you'll be taken as a soldier. Moreover, once you're part of the official system, you're connected to the empire's fortune. No malevolent spirit would dare mess with someone like that. Su Leon stood at the doorway of her home, watching her husband leave. And only after he was out of sight did she turn back toward the courtyard, ready to tidy up the house. But just as she lifted her leg to step inside, a little girl, about 5 or 6 years old with braided pigtails, suddenly peeked out from inside the house. She leaned against the doorframe, her head sticking out as she spoke in a muffled voice. "Brother-in-law really likes you, big sister." Seeing the little girl, Su Leon froze for a moment. Then her face lit up with surprise and joy as she said, "Why are you here? Did my mother send you?" The little girl nodded eagerly, and then she floated out of the house. Upon seeing this, Su Leon's joyful expression immediately darkened. With a furrowed brow, she scolded in a low voice, "No floating! Walk on the ground." This little girl, or more accurately, this little ghost, was clearly startled by Su Leon's stern tone. She quickly lowered herself to the ground, looking up at her with big, teary eyes and said pitifully, "But no one else can see me." Su Leon hurried over to the little ghost, grabbed her pigtails and dragged her inside the house. Once they were inside, Su Leon quickly shut the door behind them and said very seriously, "That doesn't matter. What if there's someone in the village who knows magic and spots you? What would we do then?" The little girl hung her head, mumbling in her muffled voice, and clearly wasn't very happy. Seeing the little ghost's sulky face, Su Leon couldn't help but laugh aloud. Su Leon reached into her pocket and pulled out a piece of candy her husband had bought for her the day before, handing it over and saying, All right, here's some candy for you." The little girl's mood lifted immediately. Taking the candy, she popped it into her mouth and added, "Sister, I still want to eat some meat." Su Leon was taken aback for a moment, then instinctively glanced toward the kitchen. The little ghost must have sneaked into the kitchen when she arrived. However, Su Leon shook her head gently and said, "No, you can't have the meat. That's for my husband. No one else can eat it." The little girl tilted her head, her face full of confusion as she asked, "But brother-in-law said before he left that sister should eat it." "Sister, you're so stingy. You're not even sharing the meat with me." while tidying up the house. Su Leon replied seriously, "Sister can't eat it either. That's because my husband cares for me, but I need to be frugal and take care of him first." As the little girl sucked on her candy, she curiously asked, "Then when can sister eat meat?" After thinking for a moment, Su Leon answered, "Of course, when I eat with my husband, then I can eat." Upon hearing this, the little girl clapped her hands joyfully and said, "Then I'll get to eat meat tonight." But before the little girl could celebrate further, Su Leon interrupted her firmly. "No, you can't. My husband is very scared of ghosts and spirits. If you stay here, you'll frighten him." Hearing this, the little girl pouted and looked sad again, her eyes filling with disappointment. "But I'll be quiet," she whimpered. "But I'm not a malevolent spirit. And besides, brother-in-law can't even see me." This wasn't up for discussion with Su Leon. She knew all too well what kind of trouble this little ghost could cause. Touching this, poking that. If she knocked over a water jug in the middle of the night, it would scare her husband half to death. And besides, she was married now. Every night, her husband would show his love and affection. If the little girl stayed, it would embarrass Su Leon to no end. Thinking about last night's events, Su Leon's beautiful face blushed deeply again. Quickly changing the subject, Su Leon said, "Anyway, you can't say. By the way, why did my mother send you here?" The little girl, easily distracted, immediately forgot about her wish to stay. She replied, "Grandma didn't ask me to do much. She just wanted me to check in. The matchmaker sent word last night that sister married well, saying brother-in-law is handsome, cares for people, and that the family has money. Grandma didn't believe it, so she sent me to see for myself." Hearing this, the corners of Su Leon's lips curled into a delicate, beautiful smile, her heart brimming with happiness. She also felt a bit proud. After all, the villagers had always said she would either marry an old cripple or some drunkard, gambler, or worse. But who would have thought that she'd marry such a wonderful man? So what if I'm a snake woman? My husband cherishes me, just the way I am. So what did you see? So what do you think of sister's husband? Su Leon, wiping the table with a cloth, turned her head slightly, looking at the little girl with a hint of pride. The little girl nodded very seriously and said, "It's true. Sister has meat to eat after getting married, and brother treats sister really well. I like brother too, because he's nice to ghosts." Hearing this, Su Leon looked at the little girl with a puzzled expression and asked, "You haven't interacted with your brother-in-law. How do you know he's nice to ghosts?" "Because when I came, I saw the buns and rice under the bridge. It was obviously part of sister's ritual. Sister is so stingy. I'm sure you wouldn't use real rice and buns. If it were up to you, you'd just use stones and sand to fool the ghost, right? So it must have been brother-in-law's idea." Hearing this, Su Leon couldn't help but roll her eyes at the little girl. "Alright, hurry up and go back. Don't distract me from my chores." Seeing the little girl lingering by the door, pouting and unwilling to leave, Su Leon handed her to more pieces of candy, finally persuading her to go. Meanwhile, I had already arrived in Taining City by carriage. I made my way to the city's market bureau. I had taken some silver out of the system space beforehand, and purchased 3 shops in prime locations, with management fees and various other costs. The total came to just over 3,000 taels of silver. As for finding tenants, I didn't need to worry about that. Once the shops were rented out, the market bureau would collect the rent on my behalf. I'll just come by every month to collect the rent. After finishing all that, I started wandering around Taining City, trying to see if I could secure an official position. But after an entire afternoon of searching, I realized I had oversimplified things. What I had thought of, others had already thought of too. These days, who wouldn't want to get into an official post? The wealthy families in particular were even more eager to get their relatives into the system. And those bringing gifts and pulling favors. Well, you needed connections for that, right? If you don't know anyone, even trying to bribe people won't work. They'd be afraid of getting caught. After wandering around and realizing there was no way in, I decided to head back for now. I'd think of something else later. On the way back to the village, as I approached the stone bridge, I hesitated for a moment. Even though I had the holy physique now, and my wife had performed a ritual for me yesterday, it still seemed safer to avoid the bridge. So I decided to take a detour along a small path, planning to enter the village from another direction. Just as I was about to reach the village, a chilling wind suddenly blew from behind me. Then an eerie, unsettling laugh echoed above my head. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I looked up and saw a very familiar, ghostly pale face grinning from the branches of a nearby tree. Why is it back again? I panicked and bolted. As long as I could reach the village, the water ghost wouldn't be able to do anything to me. Gritting my teeth, I sprinted as fast as I could, but the eerie laughter kept getting louder and closer. It was as if the ghost was mocking me. By the time I finally ran back into the village, drenched in sweat, I looked back and saw the female ghost squatting on the tree branch, making me shiver once again. At least this time, it didn't pounce on me like it did last time. Maybe it was because I now had the holy physique and it didn't dare approach. Or maybe the ritual my wife did yesterday actually worked. But the problem remained. Even if the ghost wasn't chasing me anymore, this wasn't something I could live with forever. As I made my way home, stumbling with each step, I finally arrived at the doorstep. A familiar figure quickly approached me. At first, I was startled. But after hearing the soft, sweet voice, I relaxed. Looking at Su Leon walking toward me, I said, "Why are you waiting outside in the cold? It's freezing out here." Su Leon took the things from my hands, and in a gentle voice, she replied, "I saw it was getting dark and you hadn't come back yet, so I was worried." I decided to wait at the door, looking at my thoughtful and beautiful wife. I couldn't help but feel a warmth in my heart. After we went inside, Su Leon quickly started brushing the dirt off my robe. "Brother, what happened to you?" I paused, remembering what had just happened, and said helplessly, "Don't even ask." I ran into that female ghost again. She was sitting on the tree branch, laughing at me. While running back, I twisted my ankle. Hearing this, Su Leon froze for a moment. "The one by the stone bridge?" I nodded. Just as I was about to say something, I noticed Su Leon standing there, her expression full of guilt. After all, just yesterday, she had reassured me that her ritual would work. Yet here we were the very next day, and the female ghost had returned. Seeing my wife so upset, I gently took her hand, pulled her to sit on my lap, and comforted her. "It's not your fault. If it were just a regular malevolent spirit, your method would have worked for sure." But on my way back, I thought about it more carefully. Could it be because of my great-grandfather that she's haunting me? I heard from my parents that my great-grandfather wasn't exactly a good person. He extorted people, took bribes, and was involved in corrupt practices. He would often wrongly execute people just for a bit of money. That's how our family accumulated all this wealth. Su Leon blinked, wanting to disagree, because she had seen it herself last night. That ghost wasn't someone who died unjustly. She was just picking on my husband because he seemed easy to bully, trying to mess with him for fun. Ghosts like that were afraid of the wicked. The more aggressive you were, the more they feared you. But the more you feared them, the more they would torment you. However, Su Leon didn't say this out loud. After all, just yesterday, she had claimed that the ghost wouldn't bother him anymore, and yet it had come back. I had no idea what was going through her mind, so I continued musing aloud. Anyway, no matter what the reason is. Tomorrow, I'll go find someone from the guild to take a look. I'm sure they handle things like this. Su Leon nodded in agreement, but she seemed to be lost in thought. Then I playfully slapped her on her round bottom and said, Alright, enough of that. What delicious meal have you cooked up? I could smell it the moment I walked in the door. Come on, bring it out. Snapped out of her thoughts by the playful smack, Su Leon blushed and shyly responded before heading to the kitchen to serve the meal. After we ate our fill, we blew out the candles, drew the curtains, and climbed into bed, cuddled together under the covers. I began talking about my trip to the city that day. But as I kept talking, my hands started wandering, exploring mischievously. Su Leon let out a soft whimper, then whispered seductively in my ear, "Brother, you're so naughty with that sweet call." Things began again. By midnight, I was sound asleep, but Su Leon suddenly opened her eyes, glancing at me as I slept. She seemed to remember the earlier moments, and her face flushed hot with embarrassment. After gazing lovingly at her husband for a while, she quietly slipped out of bed, put on her clothes, and carefully opened the door, disappearing into the pitch-black night. Under the stone bridge outside the village of Shigaswang, a jade-like hand covered in silver scales was firmly pressing a disheveled woman against the bridge's pillar. A large white snake's tail whipped back and forth by the riverbank, snapping like a whip as it struck the water with loud splashes. "I told you to stay away from my husband. Are you deaf?"